Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Death Valley Insiders, the fifth quarter of the Ole Miss LSU game. I mean, what more can I say? That was an incredible game to watch. Not the ending anyone would hope for, as LSU falls to Ole Miss 55-49 in the final seconds of what was a back and forth offensive game, to say the least. Uh, Needless to say, by judging by that score, that sounds more like an LSU Ole Miss basketball score as opposed to a football score. But as predicted by our pregame Vegas insider AJ Hoffman, that the over 67.5 would definitely play. Uh, that one took place within the first few minutes of the third quarter, not even halfway through the third quarter. We had the over. So a 55-49 loss for LSU at Ole Miss. LSU dropped their second game of the season in another game where they could not stop the opposing team's offense. This time, Ole Miss was a lot more balanced than Florida State was in that first game of the season, as they seemed to attack the Tigers' defense primarily on the ground, but as well as in the air. Got another great performance by Jaden Daniels outside of his turnover on that play where he took a tremendous shot to the chest and fumbled. But hey, it is what it is. Uh, Excuse me for being rude. I'm Jermaine Every, Death Valley Insiders analyst here, hosting the Fifth Quarter post game show, and we're just kind of getting into the weeds of it and just looking at the game on the surface. When you look at this game and you see a score 55-49, the first thing you think is, you know, were there any defensive highlights in this game? Uh, for Ole Miss, the first one that comes to mind was the hit that I just spoke about when Jane Daniels fumbled. Uh, but for LSU, I would say there weren't really any highlight plays in this game on their defensive side. There was very little to write home about that excited me about the defense outside of the fourth down play where they swooped in, batted down a pass, and got the turnover on downs. That was probably the highlight and what I thought should have been the turning point in the game, where instead of the offense constantly having to answer the other team in this game, and constantly the offense of LSU having to constantly match Ole Miss's energy, I thought that the defense for once stepped up and provided the juice, as they like to say, or they provided the spark for this team in that instance. And that was just a game, a play in which you would think that it would fire up the offense. Like, hey, we've been, plugging along, plugging along, plugging along. These guys got our back. They just got us the ball back in a crucial play. You know, hey, guess what? Let's see what we should. Let's get out there, fire up, and go and score for them. Score for them. It didn't happen. Just a rough game all the way around. The offense even had a hard time getting started because they fell behind 21-7 early in the game. The turnover happened early in the game, and it was just. I mean, there were some points that the team looked like, okay, hey, this looks like a game in which this team can establish something as meaningful, and they can, kind of, like I said it before. The first game was their wake up call. Second game against Grambling was their get right game. The game against Mississippi State kind of said, hey, we're establishing ourselves here. Last week against Arkansas was a little bit of a test. You got a test from a team that you thought that you could easily beat. This week, you were supposed to further establish yourself as, hey, you know what? We can win this division now. Alabama is vulnerable. Uh, we can kind of take control of this division with a win on a week like this. And as we spoke about in crosstalk with Neil McCready of Rebel Grove, uh, that this was a make or break game for Ole Miss, as far as Lane Kiffin and his staff selling to this team and all these transfer portal guys that they brought in. This was looked at as, you know, if we can't win this game, we can't win this division, we can't win the SEC, we can't compete for a national title. So this was a huge win for them, and it was a huge loss for LSU. Now Ole Miss is 1-1 in the conference. LSU is now 2-1 in the conference. There's still some outside chances for LSU to try to win this division. With that one loss, they would have to go undefeated for the rest of the season, um, and hope that at least Ole Miss drops another game as well. So they need help. Ole Miss's biggest challenge in the SEC West was Alabama and LSU. Alabama already gave them a loss, and now they've beaten LSU. So now LSU needs help from someone else to beat Ole Miss in order for them to go undefeated and to have a chance to still win this division. Two losses is going to be tough to come back from as far as trying to make it to the college football championship. They would definitely have to knock off an undefeated number one Georgia in the SEC title game in a dream scenario in order to have an outside shot at making it to the college football playoff. So as far as breaking down the season and the goals of whatnot of the season, the SEC West is still within reach. They just need help now, and they can't have any slip ups. Uh, I spoke about it before that LSU tends to drop a game in which they shouldn't really drop a game every year. The game against Florida State definitely was not that because they were just totally outmatched. I would say this game was the game that they should have won, that they inexplicably lost, and they should go on the rest of the way and try to go undefeated the rest of the way. I'm saying in hopes of making some of their more lofty goals a little bit more attainable. Um, National championship may have gone out the window, but winning the division and having a shot at playing for the SEC crown is still within reach. Uh, with Missouri, Auburn, Army, the looming game against Bama, Florida, Georgia State, and Texas A&M left on your schedule, you see where you have your obvious tests left on this schedule. None of these games are going to be truly easy, quote unquote, except maybe let's call it for what it is, the Georgia State game. But who knows? With the first quarter that Grambling had against LSU, uh, they get down to their second to last game of the season. Things are not going the way they thought they would. A Georgia State team could catch you off guard with the way your defense has been playing this year and make that game a hell of a lot more interesting. They may not win, but they could make that game a hell of a lot more interesting than what they should. So there's still a lot left to play for this team in this season. It's not all doom and gloom. I know a lot of people were saying fire Matt House today in the live thread on DeathValleyInsider.com in the quad. And guys, I'm just going to tell you, it's not time to hit the panic button right now. It's really not. Um, it's kind of like someone did mention earlier and said that, hey, um, he's kind of coaching against himself because he doesn't have the necessary pieces he needs in order to cover up the deficiencies that this team has. And basically, what he was saying was the team doesn't when you have certain deficiencies on your back end with your defensive backs, namely covering, you need other areas of that defense to make up for that, namely the defensive line. This was my key to this game, I thought, was how LSU's defensive line was going to perform against Ole Miss's offensive line. That key battle, I thought, was going to dictate who was going to win this game. And it turns out that was exactly the case today, that Ole Miss's offensive line did a good job of run blocking and pass protecting, and it allowed them to dictate the pace of the game. And they bullied LSU's defensive front when they needed to in the run game. Uh, they stretched that defense from side to side, uh, running the ball to the outside because they would run to the inside just to keep you honest, but they really wanted to run to the outside. And as I'm looking at them, run left, run right, run middle, run left, run right, run middle, RG3 says it, and he says, they're trying to stretch this defense and stress this defense out and make this defense run sideline to sideline, covering them and wear them down. They're not only going to run the ball, but they want this defense to chase after them, to tackle them, to get them tired. And that's exactly what Ole Miss was doing. They was running zone plays to the outside. They were running toss plays to the outside, speed options to the outside. Then they would still have your dive handoffs, on the run play action type of plays that they would run. They would also just have straight just turn around here and hand the ball off up the middle just to keep this defense honest. And what was happening was not only were they just running it up the middle, but they were having motion. And what that does to the defense is it makes the defense shift sometimes. It'll make you have to call out different assignments depending on, what alignment you're trying to keep. So when you have motion and then you just have what most people call a quote unquote simple handoff up the middle, why can't you stop this? It's simply because they're trying to switch the assignments, call it out. The offense sees it, catches it off guard, snaps the ball, and that's how they get you in their blocking scheme that they're looking for on what most people think is a simple play. So it's just creating a mismatch, creating some motion on the defense, making the defense call something different. Boom, the offense hits you. You're not ready. You're not prepared. There you go. So looking at the game, one of the things that stuck out to me as far as the stats were concerned was the number of total yards that both of these teams had. There was a total of 1,343 yards of total offense in this game combined by both teams. 1,300 yards of total offense. The next number I'm looking at is 0. It's the amount of defense that was played in this game. 0. Outside of a few highlight plays here and there, I want to say there were only maybe 3 or 4 3-and-outs by either team. There were some punts. The punters did get a bit of work in this game, but not much. Not much. Just the pace and the tempo that Ole Miss played, I think, also gave LSU fits not only with their substitutions but also with their conditioning. Because on Ole Miss's opening drive when they scored that touchdown, you could see defenders, especially the D linemen, hands on their waist and, kind of slouched, showing signs of fatigue, basically. And, you play for, 3 to 10 seconds at a time each play. And, you have about 20 to 25, 30 or so seconds between each play, depending on when they snap the ball. And so you would want your guys to be in better shape. And knowing that you're going to play against a team like this, you would think that they would be in better condition and you would have your substitutions and things like that down pat. But, for whatever reason, it's one thing to try to prepare for it and practice against it. It's a whole different animal when you're actually in the game and playing against it. This team, they showed some grit. They showed some toughness. But the matchup that I thought that they could win to try to dictate this game, their defensive line did not get as much pressure as I thought they could against Jackson Dart and that offensive line, which was said to be faulty and was said to be prone to penalties and giving up pressure. They did not give up pressure. They weren't prone to very many penalties either. And the penalties that they did get, the LSU defense didn't really help themselves by turning them into turnovers or forcing them to punt very many times. Just taking a look, I wanted to see what the actual stats were for the punters, because sometimes that'll it doesn't really give me an indication of how the game went, but I just like to see, I check all of the stats. I like to look at them and see, who did what and how they did it. There were 5 punts in this game, 5 combined punts. Out of all those offensive possessions, there were 5 punts, 1,343 total yards. I mean, just utterly ridiculously. This was like a video game type of game. This was something you would see if you were playing NCAA football, which hey, EA Sports, you guys need to go ahead and get off your butts and get this game produced so we can have it for at least next summer. So just uh, it is what it is. We are where we are. This team is now 3-2, 2-1 again. Like I said in the conference, they got some games that they should win coming up. But when you drop a game like this, it highlights the deficiencies that this team has, and it's not only just the pass defense, but also the run defense. This game, they gave up 223 yards on the ground on 37 attempts. That's 6 yards a rush. So you're thinking, oh, yeah, not bad, not bad. However, no, I'm sorry, that was LSU stats. 223 on the ground. Ole Miss had 317 on the ground on 49 attempts, 6.5 yards rushing. So what I was trying to say was you would think that you have a good rushing game, running the ball like you did, you would win that game. And you scored 49 points and you had 223 yards rushing, average 6 yards a carry. Not when you give up 6.5 yards a carry. You give up 317 on the ground. The other thing was Ole Miss did end up having 11 penalties for 120 yards. LSU only had 6 for 35. But when you're constantly giving up chunk play after chunk play after chunk play after chunk play after chunk play, that's when it just all falls apart. Looking for the explosive plays stats right now because that also gives you an indication of how everything kind of went. And here we go, big plays. So big plays are considered pass plays of 15 yards or more, or run plays of 10 yards or more. Ole Miss had 9 big plays in the passing game for a total of 261 yards. They had a total of 12 big plays in the run game for 218 yards. By comparison, LSU had 11 big pass plays for 285. So they had 11 for 285. Ole Miss had 9 for 261. And they had 8 big run plays for 142 as Ole Miss had 12 for 218. So this game was a lot of heavy shots. And if you're going to compare it to a boxing match, which Canelo and Charlo are fighting tonight, so I can't wait to watch that later on. But this would be the power punches. These are your big right hooks, your straight lefts and things like that. These are the big punches, the uppercuts, those type of punches, your power punches, the ones that you use to try to knock someone out with. So you want to look at those type of plays as well. Like I look at rushing yards, your average yards per rush, turnovers, penalties, big plays, third down conversions. Also, sometimes when you look at your average yards to go on third down as well, that's another little statistic that'll kind of give you a telltale sign as to how everything looked and how the game went. But the best thing to do, honestly, is just to watch the game, see for yourself, take notes, and make note of different things that you see where the game may have changed. And where I knew this game was going to be different and LSU was going to have a tough time winning this game was it was 14. They had just it was 21-7. And I want to say Ole Miss had just scored to make it 21-7, if I'm not mistaken. And the thing that bothered me the most was every time it just seemed like every time the the offense would answer something Ole Miss did, the defense would backdoor and give up another big play. And it just kept happening every time the offense would gain a little momentum. Boom, the defense would allow something back. So the offense goes down. They punt. They exchange punts. The fumble happens. Right after the fumble, boom, touchdown. 14-0. That was 1 point. LSU answers. Touchdown. That was that play, that drive where I believe it was that was the first Brian Thomas Jr. touchdown. So you look at, okay, they come back and they've answered. Now what do we do? What do? They give up another touchdown in 4 plays. 4-play drive, boom, touchdown. So it's always like the offense will, they kept snapping back, but the defense would put them in such a place to where they couldn't maintain any momentum. And from the turnover that led to the touchdown, that led to the 2 touchdown deficit, from that point moving forward, it was just an uphill battle constantly for this team. And they could never gain the momentum. And once they gained the edge, they seemingly lost their edge. And from 49-40 to lose the game 55-49 is inexcusable. And you, at some point, your defense has to step up for you in crunch time when it matters most. And this team is going to have to find some kind of way to get some sort of pressure on the quarterback. They're going to have to find a way to cause some turnovers. They're going to have to find a way to start to at least stop the run, contain the run, in order to slow down these drives and force teams to punt the ball, force teams to, turn the ball over and put their offense in more favorable positions. The offense is going to have to stay more consistent and start off faster and quicker and get the well-oiled machine going faster and better than what they normally do, because they keep starting off with these starts every game of the season. It seems like in the first quarter, they just cannot get themselves going. And the only game where they really got themselves going was against Grambling. And I mean, you're expected to beat this team, but still your defense was giving up 10 points in that first quarter. So to be up after the first quarter, okay, great. But to only be up by 4 points after the first quarter against a team that you're supposed to beat by 4 touchdowns, not so hot. So again, another slow start for this offense, another slow start for this team. They bounced back tremendously in the second quarter, coming out of the gates firing and not backing down. However, they were still down at halftime, 31-28. Again, when your offense gets going, and your offense is going to get going eventually, because this team seemingly hasn't been just completely shut down outside of the Florida State game, where the offense was, pretty much contained. This team has scored at least 30 points in every other game since. They scored 24 against Florida State. They should have had more, but missed opportunities, turnovers, so on and so forth. It happens. So your offense is going to get going, and that's why I keep saying the defense is the real key to this team, because that's where the games are decided. It's going to be teeter or totter. Your offense is capable of scoring 30-something points a game. Can you, the defense, hold this team 4 touchdowns or less? Can you hold them under 4 scores, 5 scores? Maybe giving up a couple field goals. That's what this defense needs to focus on. Let's hold the other team to 5 scores or less. Whether it's a combination of touchdowns, field goals, whatever it is, 5 scores or less. We got to do that for our offense. And that's not asking a whole hell of a lot. I mean, to hold a team between 15 and 35 points, hypothetically speaking, is not asking a whole hell of a lot from your defense. So why you can't do that, I don't know. I do know the people who are calling for Matt House to lose his job, or you know, let's settle down a little bit, because yes, there is some talent on that defense. However, we see that whether it's man or zone that they call, some of these DBs are getting burned. Even some of the guys that the linebackers that they're having put in coverage aren't able to cover the guys that they're supposed to cover. The defensive line isn't getting the pressure that they're always needing them to get with just the front four, or when they're rushing 3 down line. So you just have to be a little bit more patient, because once you get the necessary horses to run the type of race that you want to run, then you can actually say, hey, okay, now we can hold your feet to the fire. Now, I'm not saying that he shouldn't be on the hot seat, or he shouldn't be looked at as someone we're going to, look to place the blame or point the finger at, because, you see the problems with the defense. So naturally, the defensive coordinator is going to get some heat. However, we can't look to change coordinators or switch things up simply because the defense is performing the way he wanted to. Perfect example was the 63-yard touchdown pass off the play action fake over the middle on the post route. That wasn't man coverage. That was a zone. It looked like to be cover two. If you have a good play action fake and you suck in those linebackers, you're supposed to play that short zone in the middle of the field on a cover two defense. If you suck them in, it's going to create a deeper void between the back of that linebacker and the face of that safety. The distance between those two players in the cover two is dangerous, especially if your two safeties are playing split far apart. Depending on the distance between your two safeties, if those linebackers get sucked in, the middle of that field is wide open, wide open. And we saw exactly what happened. The the Jackson Dart he threw a dart to the receiver on a post route, ran a skinny post because he didn't have to run a good deep post, just a nice skinny post, 12-yard post or so, boom, right there in the middle of that field, right over the linebacker's head, right in front of the safety, and that it was a huge chasm. It didn't even have to fit it in the window because it was just wide open. The safeties were too far apart to converge on the receiver before the receiver took off, and he had enough speed to just outrun everybody else. That's what happens when you play a zone defense. However, when you're not stopping the run, you create a huge void in that zone defense. And if you run the right play at the right time, you can catch that zone defense with their pants down. That's exactly what happened on that play. So I'm not going to say that, there isn't some questions that should be called, or questions should be posed towards the defense coordinator for the calls that they're making, the defense that they're playing. But as we can see, whether it's zone or man, whether they blitz or play, man straight, or they just play zone straight and no zone blitz, whatever it is that they're doing, they're getting torched on different types of defenses that they're trying to play. So we can't say it's always the call. Sometimes the call can be right. Talent executing it may not be. It is something to look at. So just moving forward in this season, what that defense is going to have to start showing is more willingness to stop and commitment to stop the run. The missed tackles are starting to mount up. The amount of poor angles that they're taking as well, simply horrible. Continuing to see guys coming from the secondary playing safety, crashing down, taking the wrong angle. Even seeing some of the linebackers in pursuit just take the wrong type of angle and get cut off because they don't even get blocked. They sometimes get run into another player, another defender, pursuing the wrong angle. And just some of the things that I've seen just watching this team this year is there are some fundamentals that need to be corrected in tackling and pursuit angles are two of the biggest things that they need to fix. I mean, if you can't cover, you can't cover. You can't stay with a guy, you can't stay with a guy. But just a nice, good form tackle and taking a good pursuit angle to a tackle, to an attack point. Just those two things can make a world of difference and can be the difference in you giving up like they did 317 yards on the ground or 117 yards on the ground, maybe 157 yards on the ground. Who knows? But there's way too many times where guys on this defense are taking bad angles, giving up more run plays, bigger run plays, missing tackles, and giving up big chunk plays down the field. Excuse me. And it's just not looking good for him. Oh man. So just looking at the offense, though, I mean, the only thing I'll say about the offense is consistency. Just the lack of consistency in putting drives together and extending drives and being on the same page. And, one thing I will give continued props to is Logan Diggs has definitely established himself as the lead back coming out of the stable of all these running backs that this team has. He had 19 for 101, 2 touchdowns today, and continuing to feed him the ball continues to produce good things. So I'm really digging, pun intended. I know, cheap dad joke, whatever. What they're doing with Logan Diggs in the backfield. Brian Thomas Jr. I I didn't see this coming. I thought that he and Kyron Lacy and Mason Taylor were going to be like, next guys up. But as far as the wide receivers, I thought he and Lacy, had a chance to, with a lot of the focus being on Malik Neighbors, those two guys had a chance to be the wide receivers that would step up and assume the mantle of being the 2 and the 3, next to Superman or Batman, however you want to label Malik Neighbors. And those guys are stepping up and saying, hey, we're not Robin and Alfred. We're more like the Avengers, and they continue to step up and show out. And, both guys had a touchdown catch today. Kyron Lacy had one that was a 29-yarder. Brian Thomas Jr. ended up having 3 today. And every single one of them, he made the defender look as if it's like, why are you even trying? I mean, they were great defense. They were in his hip pocket, but he's going to go up and make the play necessary. Now, the one was a bit controversial, and I will admit that shouldn't have been upheld as a touchdown because when he gained full possession of the ball, the foot did not come down in bounds. However, when the field was upheld, they said it was a touchdown. It is what it is. Who's not to say that LSU wouldn't have ended up scoring a touchdown eventually on that same drive and would have taken off more time off the clock. Therefore, it could have caused a different situation towards the end of the game. I mean, you don't know. But it was ruled the way it was ruled. Things happen. It is what it is. You move on and you keep playing. Ole Miss ended up recovering from that when the students were being jerks and started throwing things on the field. You never like to see that, whether it's your team or against your team. It's just no place for that. But they end up moving on from that and rising to the occasion and pulled out the game. So something like that, as critical as a call as it was that went against them, it still ended up proving to be a determining factor in the game because it made the lead that much more insurmountable. However, they still overcame it anyway and won the game. But just shout outs to Brian Thomas Jr. 8 for 124 in those 3 touchdowns. He continues to show up, and he's definitely looking more and more like a guy that's going to, I won't say outshine Malik Neighbors, but his name is going to be talked about just as much as Malik Neighbors' name is now. Malik ended up having 8 for 102. Mason Taylor 5 for 61, and Kyle Relation had 2 for 51 and a touchdown. Uh, Chris Hilton Jr. had one for a 42 yarder that he caught and ran, and just there was one in the beginning of the game, and another time where I agree with RG3, and that was like two times this game I think that I agree with something that he said was when Jay Daniels took that deep shot to him earlier in the game, and Chris Hill Jr. decided to lay out for the ball, and RG3 said, maybe he should have just kept running and tried to catch it that way. That way you don't break your momentum. It made perfect sense because with as fast as that guy is, with legit track speed, you run through it. You don't try to dive to it. So trying to jump to the ball is going to slow down your momentum and is slowing down how fast you're moving forward towards that point of catch. So if had he kept running, I think it would have dropped in his breadbasket probably, or he maybe we've had to reach for it a bit. But it would have been the smarter play to do there. But just seeing his speed in action lets me know that there's even another level for this offense to unlock once they can actually get him the ball more times a game than maybe once or twice here and there. But they look to him for big plays, and he tends to show up when necessary. Again, he didn't run through that one catch and dove and missed it. He got his hands on it. It still looked like he could have caught it, but it just wasn't to be. But this offense is still top notch, and it's still something to be reckoned with. However, this offensive line, which was thought to be a strength of this team, they got to do a better job. Little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit better of a job sometimes. Recognizing different things and just improving upon what they're playing and how they're going about doing things because this team is going to need Jay Daniels to stay as clean as possible as long as possible. And they're doing their thing. They just got to clean up a few. I know this team has been penalty free, for the most part. They've been really good about being disciplined. But because of the deficiencies that they have on defense, this offense is going to need to operate at near perfection sometimes when you're going against a team like an Ole Miss who can push their tempo and push their pace and drive you nuts and, end up winning a game like this. So moving forward, there's lots to be improved upon. Better decision making here and there from Jane Daniels. A few better blocks or whatever here and there by the offensive line. But for the most part, this offense is clicking, and it's something fun to watch. And commenter in the live thread said, dare he think that this offense was just as good as the 2019 national championship team? And I thought, hey, easy there, relax. That team was, all time great. Not just their offense, but overall, and that offense is all time great, not only in college, but they're setting records at the NFL level. So you don't want to compare something like that to what this team is doing. Now this is good what this team is doing, but let's not equate an all time great team to what this team is doing right now. Because if this team was to be compared to an all time great team, even an all time great offense, there's no way that this team will be 3-2 the way they are right now. So let's just call a spade a spade. This offense is really good. They're really fun to watch, but they're nowhere near that team. That team is operating on a whole different level. But moving forward, again, like I said at the beginning, this team still has a lot to play for. The SEC West is still within reach. There are some still lofty goals that they can attain. They just have to become more consistent. on both sides of the ball. They have to be further and deeper committed to stopping the run, and that's where it starts in helping your pass defense by putting teams in obvious pass situations where you can pin your ears back and send some guys after the quarterback, so they don't have to cover as long, or you got them in a long enough down and distance to where they can play a softer coverage, keep things in front of them, and still make a play. So just moving forward, this team is going to have to tighten up. They're going to have to find new ways to get some guys involved. I don't know a lot of people are calling for more play from Deshaun Womack and Weeks and guys like that. I mean, if you have to at this point, you're 3-2, you're trying to salvage your season. Why not give some of these younger guys some more playing time and see what they can do in a bigger role? Why not rotate them in and out? Sometimes and say, hey, screw it. Let's see what you can do on the first and second down, as opposed to put them in an obvious passing down, pass rush situations. Maybe they might be able to make a play for you. So just uh, going throughout the rest of the season in this midseason lull that there seem to be falling into, with the near win over Arkansas and then this close loss in the shootout, another shootout back to back weeks to Ole Miss this week. You got an early game next week going to Missouri. That's going to be tough. And you're thinking, they're better than Missouri. They should be able to do this. Yes, but you're having to travel to Missouri and play an 11 a.m. game. That's not going to be easy, just strictly because of the travel and the time start. So, looking forward to next week's game. They should be able to still pull that game out. They need to have another statement game announcing that, hey, we may have dropped this game. However, this Ole Miss team is a lot better than what y'all think, and we're going to prove to you that we're a lot better than what this loss defines us as. So, time for them next week to really get back on the winning track, reestablish themselves as to their identity as being a top-notch team in the country, and just look forward to seeing what this team can do next week. So until then, I'm sure I'll be giving you guys some crosstalk with someone from Missouri, hopefully this week coming. We got different videos we're dropping every week on the site, here on YouTube. Just keep an eye out at DeathValleyInsider.com. Like, subscribe, hit the alert button. That way you can get informed every time we drop something here on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter as well at @the_Tremaine. Just stay tuned in, stay informed, and we appreciate you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next week.